Hello and welcome back to Read Becca. It's another weekly chatty catch up on my reading, everything that I've read, everything I'm currently reading, and everything I'm looking forward to reading. And the struggle is continuing to be real. This week, it's ongoing. I'm still putting one foot in front of the other. My print reading, the block that I've had mentally on reading and print seems to be lessening. I'm making some actual progress there finally. And that is very good news because the BookTube prize did begin this week and I did get an assignment. So that is really going to need my ability to read in print to go up significantly if I'm going to succeed at that. So on to what I actually read. First I read Delicious in Dungeon, Volume 5 by Ryoko Kui and translated by Taylor Engel. This is a manga. It's fantasy. It's all about kind of progression through a dungeon and cooking the things that this questing party forage for in the dungeon. So this particular volume I think was very middle of the road for me. It didn't stand out. I should have felt a lot more emotional connection, and I didn't. Mainly because this was a slower paced volume, and we were getting a lot of interaction with other people, or humanoids, I guess, in the dungeon from other questing parties or people who live there. And so that was a lot, I guess, quieter. And we also got a significant section where we were looking at our questing party, who has been sort of the center of the story, through the eyes of another questing party. So we were getting impressions of them that are very significantly different than what they imply when we're in their heads, right? So it was a different view of them. And I really liked that, but I don't know if it's just me struggling right now or if it was in the presentation of the material, but I just didn't really emotionally connect. However, I do think this did a great job of giving us more backstory, building on a lot of things we know and making them richer. So I think this is going to be very additive to the foundations of this story that's being told. So yeah, it was okay. It was not super memorable, but I think it will contribute a lot to the progression of the series. Then I read an old favorite, Kitchen Confidential. I mentioned this is a return to a book that I've read multiple times before, and I just needed something for People-April that I knew was going to be a hit and was really, really going to deliver on things I know I love. And this was. Everything about this was fantastic. I listened to it on audio and read it. I actually did just audiobook some of this in the car, and it worked out fine, probably because I have read it before, so I knew all the beats. I read it multiple times, so yeah. This is such a good book because it mixes critique of the world of cooking, kind of before that became such a big thing. This was very much the early days of famous chefs and the Food Network and things like that. Bourdain was critiquing that, and that's what this is famous for, but it's also about the passion that chefs have for their food. So he very much starts with that, with telling his story of how he came to love food with a childhood trip to France and the love of that growing up with Italian food. And that you see the seeds of what made him famous for his storytelling ability, his ability to connect with food and culture. And so I love that first part and the framing of this whole thing around that. But then we get into the very specific things. So he talks more broadly about cooking culture in kitchens, the kind of challenges, the crazy hours, the dedication it takes to do that, the drive, as well as drugs and infidelities. Those kind of general things are covered first, and then he gets into more specific things where he code names people and restaurants, but he does talk about specific restaurants or restaurateurs he's worked for, chefs he's worked for, and dishes the dirt. And so that was the big part that made this famous. But I think that was maybe the weakest part for me on this reread, because it's interesting to hear the dirt and gossip of specific kitchens, but I think his excitement and his joy and curiosity for people and food is really why I have been so invested in Bourdain as a storyteller about food. He was a gateway to so many cultures through food in the TV shows that he hosted. And that's the version of Bourdain that I like the most, much less than the gritty, gossipy guy. And so I did enjoy all of this, but it was a different balance, I think, than I had the last time I read it, where like that whole chunk of the story was kind of background for me. So it's always hard to talk about rereads because of that aspect, because you know, I feel like I've talked about things before, and I'm sure I've mentioned this in tag videos too. So I have talked about this book quite a bit. I don't know what to add to that other than this was just a joy to be back listening to his voice and his sense of storytelling and joy for food. And he does have such a heart for people. I think I already mentioned, like, he really connected with people wherever he was and gave a genuine sense of empathy for whoever he was with. So I just love Bourdain as a person, as an author, as a storyteller. So that was obviously a 5-star. Then another 5-star, and not too surprisingly. So this is Kindred by Octavia Butler. So how to talk about this book? It is very hard. This is exactly as good as everyone says it is, so the hype is real. This is one of my most recommended authors to read that I haven't. Well, I have read short fiction from Octavia Butler before, but not any of the novels. So I definitely will be reading more. It was on my TBR because of that aspect. So I put it on my TBR for the year as a goal of reading some of my most recommended authors that I haven't read books from, that people are just constantly telling me I should. So I need to get to them. So that was a priority, and this started that project off very well, I think. So it's not a plotty novel. There is a lot of plot, but that's not the focus, I think. I think characters are much more the focus. And Butler is so smart in how she lays this whole thing out, the story. And so I will set the scene. Most people probably already know what this is, but we are in the head of a Black woman from the 1970s who's married to a white man, and she begins traveling back in time. She's pulled back by a boy who is in the antebellum South every time that he is in danger or fear for his life, basically. And so I know some people like dance around spelling this out, but we learn it almost immediately that she believes he is her ancestor, and has good reason for believing that. And it's never actually like spelled out that that is the reason this is happening or anything, but her assumption here is very much that she is being pulled back because she has to intervene in order for her to continue existing, basically. So maybe my one little critique is that there are many points where she makes somewhat self-serving decisions based on that assumption, and often it does cause harm as a result. So she is always weighing that I need to make sure to do right by him, to help him, even if it does wrong to other people in this time. But there's so much complexity to that I didn't really like feel that's a massive negative. It's just something that stood out and frustrated me over the story. But I think Butler got across so well there, especially as things were wrapping up, how much there was no good option in many of the situations that she was in. So anyway, I can't talk about this too much because you don't want to go in with a lot of knowledge. I found this to be a lot like Flowers for Algernon, in that it's not a story about the individual so much. It's not a story about the plot that you're reading. It's about watching change over time, and it's a very, very smart way of delivering that, the way that this plays out, the way we're jumping through time at different rates. The amount of time that she spends in one place is not linear with the other place, and the ways it affects her relationships, the way she builds relationships with people in this other time and comes to see different sides of herself as a person. And so I really, really loved that. And I think that it is so strange to look at this and feel the progress between these two times, even though I think most of us would look back at the 1970s and see how there was so much progress yet to go after that has occurred now. And yet it seemed so progressive comparatively in the way that she is thinking about the time she lives in. And that juxtaposition together was perfectly executed. So I think this was such a wonderful commentary on race, and not just race, but class is also playing into that. And Butler is just a genius, I think, as an author. So I've read some short fiction, I've now read this book, and Butler certainly is someone that is on my radar to pick up basically everything that she has written out after this book. So it sucked me in, and I really loved it. I will note, as a result of my brain not working, I was reading this on both audio and print, And the audio narrator was good as a narrator, but was very definitely the wrong choice for this book. So she did a good job narrating in general, did a great job of the character voice here. However, almost everyone but the main character, because we're going back into the antebellum South, has a strong Southern accent. And this narrator could not do a very solid Southern accent. So that was kind of rough. So I would have preferred to just be reading this in print for my own liking. So that's my critique of the audiobook. But overall, generally, it was a good narration. From the characterization perspective, from the clarity perspective, it was good. So yeah, it was a great book though. So that is it for my reading. I have started my first BookTube prize book. I think that, and many people seem to be doing this year. I'm just not even going to mention it. I'm vlogging my BookTube prize reading, but I don't think I will bother talking about what books I'm reading when in my weekly catch-ups, because that just adds work when I'm already not feeling like doing work with filming. So it will be in the vlogs. I am working on my print read of Frogkisser by Garth Nix, still going, and it seems to actually be moving forward. So I only have about 70 pages left of it. Thank goodness. So not that I'm trying to rush it or anything, but it is very good, and I actually want to be reading it because it is such a fun book. So it has been really frustrating to me that I have not been able to really get progressing it. So I think I may be able to finish that one today or tomorrow, and joy of all joys, that will be my 24th book owned from my shelves. So I will complete my Read What You Own challenge probably in the next 2 days, definitely in the next week for sure. But that is great news, because I've done a minor cheat, a little, just a smidge, in that I was so excited about People April, as well as BookTube Prize. I had to go to the library for BookTube Prize books. And People April, I really wanted to pick up some biographies and memoirs. And so I've made 3 trips to the library. So I have already amassed a bunch of BookTube Prize and People April books. But they are going to stay shelved until I finish my 24th book, because that was the rule. I really couldn't break into library stuff until the 24 are finished. So once that happens, I think I'm going to open the floodgates and just follow my whims and joy of reading library books, because I have been through a drought of 3 months now of not going to the library too much, other than to just browse and not borrow things. So that is going to be very exciting, I think. So I will go ham on library books for the next month or so, and then I will try to get things back to mostly reading from my shelves. But we're gonna enjoy it for now, I think. So hopefully that will be my reading week, I think. Otherwise, things that are going on. I don't think I have anything to talk about life-wise. It is really still, as I said up front, just moving one foot in front of the other, keeping things moving forward. I'm so tired. I feel truly burnt out, even though I have done none of the work on my home renovation. None of it. Just having people in my space all the time, having things discombobulated is a lot. So yeah. And again, you will see that in the vlog, or you will see very little of it other than me griping about how I'm feeling. Watching? Okay, so I watched Death and Other Details, which is sort of a murder mystery, isolated closed circle on a cruise ship. It's a private cruise these wealthy people have set up for their friends and people they are looking to make deals with, and someone is killed. And Mandy Patinkin is the world's greatest detective. It's hilarious because like people just casually say that about him, and even Interpol eventually show up because obviously it's a cruise ship on the ocean, and they also kind of defer to him as the world's greatest detective. But what is so fun about this is having just read The Beekeeper's Apprentice last week. It has the same kind of dynamic where Mandy Patinkin is this older guy, but he joins up with a woman who is on the cruise that is someone he knew as a child, and picked up on the fact that she is extremely unusually sharp. And so she kind of apprentices with him. There's not the weird age gap romance that I alluded to in The Beekeeper's Apprentice, but it is really cool to see that dynamic playing out where they're both kind of a little bit geniuses at detecting. So that's fun. It's also very inspired by Golden Age mysteries. So it has that really classic feel that you get with something like an Agatha Christie, but the the themes and things it is tackling are much more modern. And I really love that kind of mix of the two things, where it is talking a lot about class and wealth and power. And I loved the way that it played out. So I did figure out kind of the whodunit fairly early on, but it took me until the very end to figure out the why, or to understand how and why. So I was not disappointed that I had figured things out pretty early. So that was a very, very satisfying watch this week. I think I watched the entirety of its 10 episodes. And I'm hoping they will continue on, because it left a little bit of things open-ended for a new mystery, or potentially for the young woman investigator to spin off and maybe start investigating more. So there was some open ending to it that I would love to see played out. I also have been brain mushy just watching Cutthroat Kitchen, a lot of really old seasons of that, and Blown Away, the new season, season 4 came out recently, and so I've been going through that. That is a glass blowing competition, and it's really lovely because they're artists who are also kind and nice to each other, and they play up the competitive aspects, but they really just care about each other a lot. It's very nice. So those I've been watching a lot of brainless stuff. I think that's all except for my recommendations for this week. And I'm actually going to pull from some old videos that I wanted to recommend but forgot to. I do that very often. So I'm going to point you to, in case you missed them, Katja from from Page Turners with Katja did a wonderful video that was right up my alley for this year. I have mentioned I've been reading a lot of old lady books, and Katja did a video discussing elderly lady protagonists in books. Definitely something I want BookTube to get behind. Let's see the groundswell for the old ladies. So this was great, very informative, gave me some good ideas for books I would love to turn to. Very helpful. The other one is also informative and more general and broad, I think. So Jack from Spread Book Joy did a great video on social reading on BookTube. So if you've ever been curious about what we're talking about when we're saying we're doing buddy reads or group reads or book clubs, that sort of thing, Jack discusses what that might mean to different people, the tools that we maybe use for those sort of things. Great, very informative video. So I think that's it for me. I hope you all are having a wonderful, wonderful reading week and a great start to spring, hopefully, wherever you are, because we are definitely into spring, thankfully, here. And thank you so very much for watching.